Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, here today to talk about The Honourable Schoolboy by John le Carré. I don't have a physical copy of the book as I read it on an e-reader, trying to maybe conserve some space. I have way too many books. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive in here. The Honourable Schoolboy is, of course, the second book in Le Carré's. I've heard it called the Karla trilogy, the Smiley trilogy, the Smiley versus Karla trilogy. But regardless of whatever this trilogy might be, it is the second volume following Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy with Smiley's People as the third volume. And this is an interesting one. And I knew it would be interesting going in because it's a little bit of a departure from the style the focus of Tinker Tailor. Now, the Honourable Schoolboy, of course, follows on right on the heels of Tinker Tailor after the mole has been found out, and it is up to Smiley and crew to try and not only rebuild the circus as an institution, but to help the United Kingdom become, to allow the Americans, always referred to as the cousins, to have the UK back at the table, to rebuild that trust of the intelligence communities that has been severed due to the actions of the mole from Tinker Tailor. And so they're trying to both rebuild the institutions, rebuild these relationships, these organizations, both at home and, of course, abroad, because Hong Kong, at this time in the early to mid 70s, up until I think 92 or 93, was a British colony, or at least a governed territory, until I think in 92 or 93 or whenever that was, that the UK switched over, not ownership, but at least oversight, allegiance, nationality to the PRC, to China. And so, while of course the circus, the UK and America are trying to, and a lot of this is kind of set too against the broader backdrop of the conflict in Vietnam, as the Americans are at this point at the kind of the tail end of losing that war, and needing some sort of win in the East, and Smiley, the circus, Lakin and all the like government cronies within this book, they need a win in the East. They need to like kind of reassert their dominance in the intelligence field, in a way that can kind of really propel them forward to, in their minds, probably hopefully eventually kind of getting the permanent upper hand against the Reds, against the Soviet Union. And so one of the things that Smiley starts up with is essentially trying to go back over the intel, and I'll try to remain spoiler free, especially regarding like the identity of the mole, even though it's the identity of the mole is revealed on, I think, the first page of this book. So it takes for granted that you already read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So absolutely, if you have not read Tinker Tailor, or maybe seen one of the you definitely need to read the book at least. Even if you've seen one of the adaptations, the book is a must. But so I'll just refer to the mole as the mole, not their actual name. But I might get into some spoilers later on, certainly with regards to the end of the Honourable Schoolboy. Anyways, so the mole would, as we learned in Tinker Tailor, start to learn more clearly in this, would kind of quash operations by British intelligence that was starting to impede directly into like a major lead into Soviet operations and Soviet bank accounts and money trails, and the golden seam, the golden seam, as they call this, money that is So essentially, what Smiley happens upon through files that they pull through corroboration with field agents and everything of things that were kind of shut down by London, by the circus, had to do with money that was being funneled into an account essentially owned or at least put in trust by a gangster, a millionaire from Hong Kong named Drake Ko. So, as again, we're getting the broader backdrop, which even begins at the beginning of this book. We start in Hong Kong with kind of this ragtag group of journalists that are kind of just living out there, some Americans, some British. Some of those British journalists have some ties to the circus. They're not exactly agents, it seems, but they at least help agents that come through. But it establishes this scene, of course, of this like little slice of the West that is consumed on all sides by the East. So it is an interesting, it is an interesting setting, an interesting staging ground for this broader conflict. And so what Smiley does in order to try and build an investigation into this huge money trail of, like, I think they say at one point £500,000, and knowing that money might be placed in trust for an agent who is in the field and they don't have access to their money yet. So while of course they investigate this millionaire Drake Ko, they also start to investigate, okay, who might he be working with? Who might be an agent that is, deep behind state or enemy lines, so to speak, that they are holding this money for, somebody that they may have turned a long time ago. And so thus starts kind of the thrust of the plot of this novel. So Smiley dispatches Jerry Westerby to Hong Kong to begin investigating. Now, Jerry so he's introduced in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy as this kind of intriguing, he's a journalist, but he's also an agent for the circus. And so he's able to use a journalist cover often for going into certain areas, for trying to get access to certain people to ask them questions. And he can ask them kind of penetrating questions under the guise of, oh, I'm writing a story about this. You mind if I ask you about this? And he can just kind of play the journalist card wherever he goes, when in fact he's gaining, or he's trying to obtain intel that he can then filter back to the circus, while at the same time, in order to maintain his cover of a journalist, is also actually writing articles and kind of dispatching things here and there, as he kind of gets into it with particularly Luke and Craw in this book. And so this book is like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It rides the line between the armchair espionage or the white collar espionage of Tinker Tailor, where we had a lot of we had Smiley trying to deal with things on his own end, but in this he's kind of he's playing the role of coach, and we actually have operatives in the field in this, unlike Tinker Tailor, where you're dealing with the aftermath of of a mission gone wrong. Here you are directly involved in the middle of an operation. So it's cool to have that juxtaposition between Smiley in the UK and Jerry in Hong Kong, Smiley's trying to, from a top-down level, run things. Jerry's boots on the ground, trying to deal with things, and then there are the lulls too, where Jerry has no standing orders. He has nothing to do, and he starts to kind of this restlessness builds up with him, which has definitely greater implications further down the line as he just has his own time to kind of think through things. And of course, Smiley has to also kind of little bit go behind the backs of government figures, kind of appeal to them and try to be the cool level head as they, of course, try to talk down to him, because they come to the table with all of these various interests and predispositions, whereas he is just the man trying to do what is best in the war of espionage against communism. That's, you know, that is Smiley's role. That is his bread and butter. And as things progress, so of course this book is long. It's about 600 pages or so, and it's a dense 600, and it is slow. That is both a credit and I think maybe a hindrance to it. Is this book just requires a lot of patience, um, and a lot of, and what I loved about Tinker Tailor is just the naturalism of the espionage. You'll get a lot of the individuals, Gillum, DeSalis, Connie Sachs, who are, and Smiley himself sometimes, who are based in London, who realize that they can start to kind of investigate things related to Drake Co. On their own end, and so they'll make up a cover, make up an identity, and then go and on themselves interview these people, ask them questions, and they're able to kind of do some things on their end. Jerry's able to do things on his own end too. There comes a point, I think, right when you get around to the middle of this book. For me, it was around probably past 300 pages, when you're approaching page 350, that I think the pace started to work a little against it. But then literally that was right at the point where Jerry gets more standing orders, and he kind of goes off, and the scope expands for the first time, really expands beyond Hong Kong, and we're kind of going into areas around Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam and Thailand, and we're starting to, as through the interviews, through as everybody's kind of trying to put the pieces together for this broader narrative, this broader covert conspiracy that's kind of before them, that they're trying to get to the bottom of. As more figures start to come into play than we actually have, we see them. We see Jerry going out and trying to find them, and that's where then that kind of leads into the last act of the books. That really is the last act. And so I'll start to get into some spoilers here. But if I just, in some concluding spoiler-free remarks, this was a really solid book. I just think taking your time and patience with it is of absolute importance. I would say that, if I had to, that there were times at first when I thought that the Honourable Schoolboy might actually be superior to Tinker Tailor. But now I think, Tinker Tailor I still think has the edge on it. Maybe if Honourable Schoolboy was a little bit punchier, and I hate to kind of be the person that's like, okay, cut a chunk of the book and it would have been better, but I think it would have had a little more, it would have been a little more lean and fierce, while still being able to do everything that it was able to accomplish. Tinker Tailor could do just that in, 2/3 of the length. So, but yeah, very solid, and the ending helps to put kind of everything in even greater and darker context, I think. So I'll get into that now. So now, spoilers from here on out. So with the way that the narrative progressed, and as Jerry, as he meets Charlie Marshall, as he meets Ricardo, as he meets these figures, and these kind of almost like himself, these insane men who are right at the edge of things, and as they are pushed by Co. and by forces outside of their control, but also by their own personal almost bloodlust, they're driven to the edges of sanity. And Jerry himself, I think, is too, as he is just so relentless in trying to get to the bottom of this. But I think that he also is under the, maybe, I don't know if it's a British quality in him or if it's just his personal feeling that he can uh, be the hero of the day and get the girl. And that's been something that even when they picked up Jerry from Italy at the beginning of the book, and these women that are constantly on his mind, and he has this kind of almost, and it's established with a daughter he has this almost paternal instinct, even though it isn't strictly paternal, I guess, in particular in regards to Lizzie towards the end. Um, but I feel like he almost feels like he has a responsibility to bring as many people out of this conflict as he possibly can, and he himself kind of, in trying to do the right thing, the lines between what he wants, he's not able to remove himself from the equation, and that's probably part of what Le Carré is saying about the human toll, the erosion of the mind that takes place when you're in an espionage of trying to constantly put up fronts, trying to constantly look behind both shoulders, of just this relentless pushing for getting more intel, getting more info. All this collection that you're trying to do, when ultimately the suits might not have your best interests at heart. And I think because he's seeing this a fellow Brit in Lizzie, of somebody who was ultimately manipulated, and that's part why uh, I think Westerby sees people like, I mean, what starts kind of this precipitous break is individuals like Sam Collins, and Collins is an interesting figure in this book, of course, because he's kind of always in the shadows of somebody who's implied, kind of manipulated Lizzie to be, he kind of sicked Lizzie onto Co to try to follow the Golden Seam, but introduced her to these unsavory figures in which she ultimately lost herself. And I think Westerby, he hates that side of spycraft, that kind of smarmy, manipulative. Even though Westerby himself engages in that, I think he might still view himself as more moral or as above that. And so at the end, it was a little surprising, I think, when he kind of said screw it and just tried to go after Drake and Nelson himself and try to make an exchange for Drake to get his brother back. And then in his folly of trying to protect Lizzie and get her away from the situation, and I love the interplay of Fawn. The presence of Fawn in every scene is kind of Smiley and Gillam's bodyguard, so to speak. And then Smiley himself acting with that stiff upper lip and resolve in a resolute attitude, knowing that he's sacrificing a lot, but for the good of the UK's standing. And I think that is something that kind of back level dealing that comes to a head at the end of this book, when all of a sudden the American helicopters kind of drop out, Fawn's in there, Fawn shoots and kills Jerry. So the Americans, with the help of the British, the Americans can bag Nelson, and then they take him back to America. And then when you kind of have those scenes in the circus towards the end, where everybody almost feels betrayed, that they did all of this legwork, they did all of the legwork to try to nab Nelson, and this long lost brother, and then to have the rug pulled out from them at the way end for the Americans to kind of go, and it to be revealed that in order to kind of rebuild those relationships, the government heads at the behind, with Smiley pretty much fully aware that this was going on and accepting it, maybe because he could see that it might have been the greater good. I think Smiley was always one that was able to kind of push that to the side, but yet it still does eat away at Smiley, I have to believe. He just doesn't, he's got a good poker face, which is, of course, was evident in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So Jerry is this kind of tragic figure, certainly. He's just, I think, emblematic for the erosion of ideals, and when you place somebody who might be more idealistic in a smarmy environment, and you give them an opportunity to maybe develop relationships with the people that they're supposed to be tracking, and then it creates friction. It creates a schism in what the individual wants and what the state wants, and then but ultimately the state wins. Is kind of this, again, it's understandable in its realism, but it's also kind of heartbreaking at the same time. So yeah, I mean, yeah, this book was really, really solid. The ending just really, you know, it sticks the landing in every regard. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see Smiley's people. Okay, where do we go? How does this all, the story of Smiley and Karla, how does it wrap up? So I'll be interested to find out. So, The Honourable Schoolboy, if you have read it, let me know what you think of it, and I will see you guys next time.